Here's a restoration of a 1955 Greyhound Scenicruiser bus, touring bus, I guess. You would call it a double-decker. I've been in one of these once and have ridden Greyhound across the United States, which is a real trial. And you've got two halves here. And the casting, of course, doesn't quite match up. And so I will be taking a metal file to it and trying to make the match a little bit better. One thing you do have to worry about here is that when you paint it, the place where you filed it sometimes um, comes out a little bit flatter, a little bit slicker than the areas around it. And I'll leave it up to you, the viewer, if you can see that on the final product. It's there a little bit, but it's something you should be aware of if you go into filing these things. And I could actually see through this, the gap here. There's a gap between the two halves, and so I knew I was going to have to do something with it. And you've got to just be careful here. Here I can pretty much go at it. But if you're going to do other things, for example, in the windows or here in these detail on the back, you're just going to have to be really careful. And I do a little bit and then I back off of it. I'm afraid I'm just going to file away some important details. So what I want to do is I want to take away the unevenness. I want to fill in the gaps, and before I get on to that, I'm going to take the wheels off. Like I said, a really good shape, except it didn't have a paint, or when I got it, the paint was really bad. But the wheels are in really good condition for as old as they are. And they're just held on with nails. So just a little gentle persuasion, and these nails all came right out. And as you see the wheels coming up, you see that there's some blue under the wheels that I hadn't taken off. And later in the paint scheme, all that the lower half will be silver, and I just paint these wheel wells as silver too. I think at least the rear wheel wells were blue, but I just paint them silver. And there she is. And what I was trying to do here is get the two sides even. They were just a little bit uneven, and once I applied some pressure, I thought, well, I can put some solder there, hold them in place, and then when I put my metal putty on there, as it dries, it'll hold it in the right place, which is true. But I'm hopeless at soldering. This is actually the second time I did this, and it was enough to hold it. But once I went over the soldering area with this file, I ended up knocking it off. So after I put on primer, I looked back, and lo and behold, there where the solder had been, there was a gap. So I had to go back and fill that in and then put some primer on it again. But I've spared you that little detail. So this is where the metal putty is going on, and that it went on really well. I guess that it's the metal putty that gives a different sheen to the paint when you put over it. It's kind of sands down a little different than um, the metal around it. It's probably not actually the filing, but the metal putty. So here I go at it, and I'm just taking away corrosion and things like that with steel wool and getting in the nooks and crannies. And a lot of nice detail, especially on the dog. You can actually see the ribs of the dog in the end product. You can't, because it's got a layer of primer on it, and then it's got a little bit of overspray from white, a little bit of overspray from silver, and then it's got blue on top of it, and then I put chrome on top of that, so it doesn't do much for the detail. So I'm going back over this again, making sure that it's got the right effect. It's laying down nicely. And here we go with the spray paint or the primer. And the wheels have to be cleaned. So this is just a dumb process of dishwashing liquid and a toothbrush and getting stuck in. Luckily here, no one had tried to paint this. There wasn't any extra overspray. There wasn't a lot of dirt on them. They were dirty, but in really good shape, especially for having come out of 1955. And then also going over the nails and with some sandpaper and wiping them down with a towel that had some WD-40 on it. I'm not sure that helped them go back in any easier, but that's what I did. And we'll be seeing these back toward the end of the video. And here I've already put the white on the top. The white just went on that double-decker part, not even the roof. That's going to be blue. So taping it off with some nice modeling tape here, and it's a fiddly but easy process and necessary. I would certainly not have a steady enough hand with a brush to get these things straight. Certainly not with spray paint. And the only thing that was a little bit of a challenge is that the right there in front of that second upper windshield where the tape is going now, that there's just a band of white across there in the original paint scheme. So I wanted to keep that, and I did, but I had to be careful with the taping. So here I've taped off all the top that's going to be white and blue, and just putting on some silver. And now I'm realizing it isn't silver, it was transparent. So anyway, sometime later, I did get the silver on there and put a couple coats, and later that transparent will go over the whole toy. But it's a kind of a funny moment there. I'm just sort of looking at this thing in my hand like, what an idiot. Here I'm cutting the tape so that it's nice and straight with an X-Acto knife and pulling it up with a toothpick, and that made for a very nice little white area that got the effect that I needed to get. And now for the bottom. So the top and the bottom have been done. And it just leaves it to that middle part with the Greyhound on it and the words and the word Greyhound. And all of that will need to be chromed or silver. And as I'm doing this, of course, I'm trying to get nice and straight. I get the spray paint out, and I think I put on a little bit too much, and the paint started to have this in some places it was kind of bunching up, kind of like old skin or something like that. And I'm just so irritated here. It's just, what happened here? You see right in front of the dog there, the Greyhound. There's just, and it was just kind of weird. So I was going to take everything off, and I thought, no, let me. I've got it nicely taped up. So I went with steel wool and took off a bunch, and it smoothed it out. And I thought, let me just give this a try here. As I was doing this, the dog, the Greyhound, and the lettering popped up very nicely, and it gave me an idea. Maybe I don't have to do this with a chrome pen, at least not the lettering. So here it is after I've painted it again, and that turned out fine. Gently taking off the paint or the tape so you don't rip the paint off or do anything silly like that. Ask me how I know. Well, that's really starting to look like what it needs to look like. I will clean up this rear spare wheel. I don't think it was actually a spare wheel, but it's kind of what it looks like. And I'll do that here with the chrome pen. And that matched very well the color, the silver metallic color I put on the bottom. And here on the edge of a paint stirrer, I've put some very fine sandpaper. And what I'm doing is I'm sanding the paint off of the letters. And of course, then the shiny letter pops out. And I'm going to be putting some kind of transparent varnish across it so it'll be protected and it won't corrode. And this is how I decided to do the letters. And it worked pretty well. I only scratched it in a couple of places, and I had to fix that later. And then here, couldn't get a good camera angle on this, but here I'm trying to trace out the Greyhound. I did this with a 1mm pen, and then filled in the body with a 2mm pen. But that turned out okay. I messed up a little bit there on the front leg. You might have noticed it, but came back just a dab of blue paint on there, and that was done. Here there's a bit of overspray, so it was just putting some spray on this piece of wood here, and then going back over and just gently dabbing that on, and it covered it up right up. So just a little bit of cosmetic work here. And we're getting really close to being done. Very big Tootsietoy, certainly something bigger than I'm used to working with. And a little bit more modern. I think I like the stuff from the 30s, maybe the Grams or something like that. But it's a nice toy. It's a good-looking toy, and it's a pleasure to work on. So now this kind of varnish on here, it's nice and shiny. It's protected, and we've got to put the wheels on, which is simply a process of hammering it in. Just a little nail hammer there. Make sure they still turn. And put some protection on there because you don't want to miss the nail. And scratch the paint. Again, ask me how I know. And they went in quite easily. And here we go. And from 1955, this beautiful little toy is beautiful again. Ready for the display case, or maybe just to be played with. Thanks for taking the time to watch this video.